Here, so. Al Raymond is not going to make it, but he said that he might join us remotely. I'm not sure that he can. Everybody else is here except for Sarah, and I know she has a hard time getting to these meetings, and I don't know if she'll make it. If she comes late, we'll record her then as attending. We don't have any minutes because this is kind of a special meeting. Somebody had said that we had decided to have meetings every 2 weeks. What, if I remember correctly, we decided was try having them once a month, but if we needed them on the odd, second week, that we would do that. Is that people's general recollection?
Said we were gonna do every two for the time being.
I thought it's because there was a lot of stuff going on and we had deadlines that were coming up and we had stuff to chew through.
But we didn't set any times for those, any dates for.
No, but I would say I agree that we
Yeah.
had discussed that we would meet every 2 weeks.
Okay, so then I'll work with Patrick to get the next every other week meeting going.
I think the next one though would be next month. Right? Almost
May.
last Wednesday.
First Wednesday of the month and then the second Wednesday.
Yeah, May has 5.
Yeah.
I don't think,
sorry,
yeah,
support.
if we don't have estimates from them, it's not worth
Yeah.
meeting with them. They do, so then let's go every other week,
Okay.
maybe. So this was, let me first, I'll read what Al wrote to me. I apologize, I will not be able to make the meeting tonight. The only thing I have for input, why are we not waiting until the quote comes in before we request additional items? If the quote comes in higher than we can afford, then it doesn't really matter. It was mentioned that a multi-field would be nice to add, but when you look at the area we have access to, a second track is the only thing that might be an issue. But I feel like that can be dealt with in the future. If the meeting is virtual, I may try to attend. So I replied to him that, I would share that with everybody. So you know what he had to say. And I know, Jeff, you were going to do some research on parking spaces and stuff.
Oh, I have that information, actually, sorry.
So that would go to the ed spec consideration.
Yeah, but kind of. It's preliminary, so you can't really see how much space is put in, so. It's not really. I don't think it's pertinent as much as the outdoor fields and stuff like that.
You weren't counting the spaces that we currently have? I thought you were counting the spaces we currently
I
have.
was gonna count the spaces we currently have, but I also don't have a reference to what they were putting in yet.
Oh, okay.
Because that could be 3,000 spaces in that little U shape without knowing, so I think it's kind of premature to do crazy stuff.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we.
So I did get numbers, but so I thought the question was, how many are we occupying versus, I didn't do how many do we have, I did how many are we occupying?
Oh, okay, so we got all kinds.
Yeah. So middle school, approximately 100 and, high school, which includes, I had them include central office, 215.
To 1-5?
Yep,
And how many of those are students versus staff?
I didn't have. Down.
So this is currently occupying.
I could get that, I mean, because.
So that would be
Yeah.
315 current.
Dictated by
Teachers.
zoning requirements.
Yeah,
A lot of times it's
the size of the
1.5
per square feet.
Yes, I forget. I think it's 1.5 per staff person.
Oh.
Something like that. At least that's what I've seen historically in other towns.
So we need to know how many would be required in accordance with the amount of staff that would be there.
Right.
Which is middle school and high school staff.
And it may vary. Middle school might be less. I don't,
But
but usually high school's like that.
in high school, we have students that would park as well.
That's right, but not every student. That's why they do
Right.
1.5.
Okay. Okay, so, guess
I
we'll
mean,
see
you
what,
can have more than that, obviously.
well, that would be great.
As long as
1.5 sounds like a lot, though.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know what the
Yeah.
math is on it, but it sounds.
Right, I mean, because you're not gonna create your plan to most attended events, right?
Right.
That would be a waste, so that's why usually it's rule of thumb. 1/3.
Yeah. Okay, so, that had to do with parking. There was also some fields and playgrounds discussion. Who had comments about that?
I did, I put out some stuff, you guys want to pass these around, I kind of try to put some stuff together. And you're not gonna be able to read it and have a chance to redo it, because I had soccer and PT and everything else, so I can just be.
Just one.
It's not very legible, yeah, one.
Yep. That's yours. Ice cream park that was.
So basically, I looked at the GIS of the maps of school, above, for fields, and I still don't see much square space to do much. I like the idea. Having a couple of these fields, but if you look at typically like football and soccer, it's not something that we utilize here. We don't really have a football field. Trying to gain space. I was hoping maybe the softball field and baseball field would be put together to get a little more space, but then I realized softball field is different size than the baseball field. So I guess moving the building around, which they already said, it's, you know, maybe you're gonna lose next space and have a field.
What was that?
No, he's got maps.
Yeah, just
Kind of.
so. I'm trying to figure out how to kind of get the placement so we can get everything in there. I just don't see a lot of space unless we kind of move the building. So writing down what I passed out now, what I kind of figured out, and looked at. It kind of utilizes a little stuff. You know, so during the fall, you have middle school and high school kids now. So we've got fall cross country for middle school. We've got cross country, girls volleyball, boys and girls soccer. So winter, you got girls and boys basketball for the middle school. And winter, boys basketball, girls basketball, indoor track. Spring track for the middle school, and spring boys basketball or baseball, girls softball, girls and boys track. We obviously can't put 5th and 12th graders together or close to each other. You don't really want that. So I just don't see a feasible way to make what we have work with all the kids. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm saying if we can keep the middle school going in the sense of using the fields, you'd have to say the middle schoolers for cross country go up there for their practices. So it'd be one bus per season.
Up there, middle school,
Going
at
up
the
to the
middle
middle
school.
school. Winter basketball, you have girls and boys. Same thing, busing up there, maybe they switch different time. But another problem I think we have too, with some parents is the timing, and you have, say, girls soccer coming in at 4 or 5 o'clock or whatever it is. A lot of people are not willing to drop. You know, a lot of them like it when they pick them up one time after school. So I'm hoping maybe some of these things can alleviate that and retain playing sports. I know I'm all over the place a little bit with it, but like, let's say the high school for the fall with boys and girls soccer. If we had that practice field, if we could squeeze something in here that's a multi-use field, it's open field, you could throw some lines on it for soccer. Girls can play at the same time, boys getting picked up at the same time. Winter, you almost look at the boys using the basketball, if we're getting 2 new gyms. Boys are using one, girls are using the other, and again, they can flip flop. And then you're putting the boys and girls up at the middle school to use that gym for practices. Obviously means games and you come back to the actual school.
Why are boys, and I mean, are you talking about, so high school boys and high school girls
Yeah.
are using different gyms at the same time?
Correct, for basketball,
Okay.
Because you can't really practice with half a gym. So it's like this year, the boys are trying to practice soccer on a middle school field that's tiny. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't learn anything. You couldn't practice plays because everything was this big. You get on the field and everybody's confused. You don't have enough room. You know, the fields are so tiny in middle school, they're working
You're talking about soccer now.
soccer, yes.
Soccer there, rec soccer, big boys used to practice there.
At the middle school.
Yeah.
What I'm saying, this year, it wasn't even close to the right size. So if you're trying to practice plays and do stuff, like I'm just saying for the high school this year, that's what I'm saying, right size. It just. So
But
you
if
kind of
we-
need a full field, you need,
If we have a full field at the high school for the high school kids, and we right size the one at the middle school for middle school kids to practice, then that kind of solves that, right?
well, that's what I'm kind of getting at. If we have our regular soccer field there now, say the girls are practicing there, and we have a multi-use one, which is an area, same size soccer field. Girls or boys can go on that side, they can switch every other week, whatever, then they have a space to practice, staying on campus there. We're kind of taking the middle schoolers, since they're a little bit younger, putting them up here to do their practice.
If that's still a thing.
Yeah, if it's, so
Well, that's what I'm asking. That's why we're trying to figure out everything
how
else.
available, how practical is busing kids?
They're gonna be
One bus per season.
I mean, it can be doable. I mean, just a point of clarification. I
Yeah.
do think, I mean, the architects have said this as well too, where the existing tennis courts and basketball courts are, there is a large amount of space where you could put, you know, that, I will say, like, I live in a neighborhood, that has a multi-use field, actually does, like, it's softball, baseball. They do football, like lacrosse, like, it's like all encompassing, on it. I will say currently, I mean, if you look at what we have for sports right now, we don't have middle school, soccer at this time. It's based on, I mean, interest, and certainly the interest of the community could change. I mean, that's why we shifted from soccer to cross country, because we have 50 kids into like cross country. Like that's where now certainly at some point it could shift back to soccer. You know, who knows, like the trends. I mean, lacrosse is a perfect example now. I mean, that didn't really exist as an option when I was a kid. You know, it's another sport growing. But so I do think you gotta take in consideration some of the sports we run as well too. But if the question is like, can you bus kids? Yes, we could bus kids.
Good thought. I mean, as far as if it's not the middle school, what's wrong with that lower field at the elementary school?
Get a full-time field.
We used to,
As well as, you know, we've had 3 baseball diamonds.
right?
Yeah, so you can absolutely do that.
Just because I just don't see by tracing everything out, figuring out how many people, we just, like you said, I agree with you, but it's just not big enough where their placement of the schools now.
Well, he
That
said,
can
yeah,
definitely change.
that was supposed to.
That can definitely change.
Yeah.
It just definitely was, it's not, it doesn't.
But if we have other alternatives to remedy that, then it really isn't an issue.
Sure, I guess my concern is I want to make sure that
Our remedies.
there are, I mean, just in the track, the soccer field's garbage. I mean, it's garbage. Scout Hall's taken care of like it's gold, and I don't know why do we not have lights or anything good at the high school, like, I
But
don't.
that's separate from building a new school.
I mean,
So if
definitely.
you want to put lights on the field, you can
Yeah.
have lights in the cross here. That's totally doable.
If
Yeah,
we
I know
need
that,
to
but that's-
maintain or repair, that's a whole separate thing than.
I get that. But there's like 10 different things here.
Yeah.
So it's like trying to, you gotta kind of go step by step. So I mean, besides getting what we need and what we use, because that's kind of like the pinnacle of our school, that's where we have homecoming stuff and everything else, like the
Hmm.
soccer needs to get done, the field, what we're gonna do. I mean, that's stuff we have to give them to get an estimate, right? If we don't figure out some of this stuff, then how are we getting a correct estimate and trying to go to referendum?
I think it would be appropriate to just ask them if they could, I mean, I'll be honest, like, it's important for us to have field, especially the stuff we have right now. I think that's important, and it sounds to me like they're actually doing that piece, but I think what schools and what's inside of it, and those things are the most important thing for our students. But I think asking them, giving them the task to make sure that there's options for us. I mean, I think asking them to look into that and giving us some suggestions on what it would be, but I think to everybody's point, I think there's options. I mean, we do have the middle school, we do have the elementary school, we have Scout Hall. We have things, we're not gonna fix everything in this. I think the school buildings are probably the most
But it's also valuable to bring up what you're bringing up, Jeff, because as they're doing what they're doing, they can say, oh, and let's look to see if we can put that there, or if we can repair that, or if we can add or whatever. So it's certainly all worth a conversation, all of it.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing to know, after the meeting last week, we heard your concerns about a multi-purpose field or a field. So I asked the design team to look at, on the new version, look at sliding it over, I want to say to the north. I may be incorrect on the direction, but slide it over. And there was a large parking lot off to the left to create a multi-purpose field off to the left there. Now, we do have to have a loop road around the school,
Yeah.
which is fine, but it doesn't really interfere. That gives you a large space there, and that means we don't have to do anything with the existing fields, which saves, quite a bit of money. So you get a multi-purpose field for, be on the middle school side of the wing there. And you can use it for whatever you need to use it for. You still have I think you have a softball and baseball field there. I
Yeah.
think the baseball field was cut off, if I'm not mistaken. You have soccer field, track, and your tennis courts. So, that's like a typical high school layout for sports. Now you have the 2 gymnasiums. I don't know if you have middle school basketball or not, but at least if you do, you have them, if you're at the high school, you would have to schedule, because you only have 1 gymnasium there. If you have boys practice and girls practice, you still have to schedule that.
Yeah.
You'd have the same thing with the 2 schools together if you have a girls middle school basketball team as well.
That's as much what I was talking about as far as practicality, Patrick, is not just the fields and busing kids, but scheduling wise, is it such a challenge to be able to schedule both middle school and high school?
If we have the utility field schedule.
That's what I asked them to do, so hopefully they're adjusting it and moving forward with that. It seemed like there was enough space to slide it over and create a multi-use field on the, I want to say, south side.
There's an ugly question that goes along with that, though. If you have a utility field or multi-use field, and the 5th and 6th graders or 7th and 8th graders, whatever, are playing on that, and then the high school is warming up, practicing on their own, it's like we're going through great pains to keep the middle school and the high school separate. And then after school, it's okay. I'm just being devil's advocate here.
I mean, based on the number of kids participating, you do have coaches, you do have supervising.
Yeah.
They're not on the same team competing with each other, but they will be in separate spaces with different release times. I don't think that would be so much a concern for.
So you would be able to stagger when
Yep.
one starts, which means
Correct,
they
yeah,
get
but
there
that being said,
earlier.
at some point, everyone will be outside together, but not
Yeah.
together as
But
far
they're
as they're,
playing.
correct. Yep, they're being instructed in different spaces.
That's where I'm more thinking about
Again, I have
practicality.
to say this though, because having my daughter in 5th grade and making observations that I experienced, I go to pick my daughter up from track and I don't have to sign her out. She just walks out the door. And I pick her up and I drive away. And there's not a list to say that she went with her mother. It's just they see me or she says, oh, my mother's here, and she runs out. And I'm not saying,
Yeah, that's a whole Patrick thing. Has nothing to do with.
no, I'm just saying that I'm honestly, I'm all right with that at the middle school level.
Well, it's
Because it's just the middle school.
yeah.
But what I'm saying is, you can't protect for I just need to mention this, because you
Yeah.
can't protect for every possible incidence of something.
Right.
But the opportunity would be there for 2 young, wily people to get together.
Maybe not a fifth grader and a high school senior, but maybe a eighth grader. right
It has,
now.
and not
High
to be
school
mean or
football.
nasty, but it has happened before, and not necessarily in our school, other places. These things happen. Kids are crafty and you can't, like I said, you can't protect against every possible incidence of something. But just to keep this in mind as we go through these conversations, because somebody's going to bring it up.
But expanding on that, also have twelfth graders in a soccer field right here, say our multi-fields here where you got fifth graders. The conversations, it's the language, it's twelfth graders versus fifth graders, like they're right there with an earshot. It's,
Maybe you shift the school over to the other side, and you put the multi-use field
well, I
to the
mean,
right.
I guess that's what I'm trying to think about too, is if you're combining schools and we're being so diligent about keeping them separate here, like you said, throwing them all back defeats the purpose of this, you know,
To a degree.
to a degree.
So maybe we look into shifting the school to the left or to the south.
To the
and not
south
north.
and the,
You know,
I guess we need to wait for the experts to see if that's
Yeah.
possible.
I just, Jim and Samantha, I did have just a curiosity question with, the existing fields. I know like the plan is for them to stay in place. Would they remain as is or would there be any chance of them being changed over to turf, or that's not even like in the picture?
I mean, you could, but when you do sports fields, you're reimbursed at half their expense. And then turf is not reimbursed.
And,
Oh, it's not,
and a
it's not real.
maintenance, it's a maintenance nightmare,
Turf?
turf.
Okay, I was thinking it was less
I
of
have
a.
experience with that.
Yeah,
So it's kind of odd. The prep for the turf
yeah,
is reimbursable at half your rate.
Yeah.
But then the turf itself is not reimbursable.
Yeah.
Is that artificial or
Cost
real?
or half your rate?
Half your rate.
Oh,
And
And
it's
then,
very,
like I said, the turf itself is not reimbursable.
Artificial
It's
or
odd.
grass? Are we talking-
Artificial.
Okay.
Grass, natural grass is reimbursed at your
Yeah.
50%
All those little beads underneath those.
of your reimbursement rate.
so 63 goes down to 31
yeah.
and a half. Yeah.
so, when you say 50, you're not saying 50%, you're saying
Say
50.
50% of your reimbursement.
Gotcha.
So like maybe not so much in the lights then.
Well, but here's the thing, though,
Any site related.
people are gonna wanna see everything getting done,
Parking
not
lots
just.
are fine, whatever, any sports related field is reimbursed 50% your rate.
Any sports field?
Tennis courts, baseball, football, soccer, whatever. Lights are not reimbursable.
Playgrounds?
Playgrounds are reimbursable, but usually it's, you know, it would be for middle high school.
No, I'm saying like, I'm shift, sorry.
Yes.
While we're on the topic.
Playgrounds are reimbursed. Yep.
Can I ask a question? When we get the estimate, is it not a la carte, but is it gonna be, this is how much it is for the buildings? And then thinking about like what they're talking about with the fields or adding lights or something like that. We know what our max is that we can spend. So if we're not at that point, can we say, okay, well, how much would it be to add this in? Or how much would it be to add that in? So that we could maybe get to adding these.
Well, we know how much debt we can take, in, which is not necessarily equivalent to how much we can spend.
Right.
Correct.
Because the reimbursement rate makes a big deal. So, you know, if we don't get the space
Yeah.
down to where it needs to be, if we don't get the reimbursement rate where it needs to be, all of our total cost of the project changes a lot.
And if you want, I mean, kind of getting ahead of myself, we just did a quick analysis of
The survey.
where you are for Broadbrook.
Oh.
And again, it's very broad numbers. This
Oh,
is
but you have
being
no-
estimated right now
Yep.
by the estimator.
Yep.
We took very broad
Mhm.
square foot numbers to kind of show you, okay, here you are, especially on the high school. Broadbrook is pretty straightforward
Yeah.
in terms of we're gonna stay within the confines of the existing exterior walls. We're not doing any additions or anything like that. The only caveat is we're not going to renovate other than this very small bit of the permanent modulars. We're not gonna do anything in there because otherwise you get dinged for your reimbursement. And it doesn't make sense to do that since they're only
Right.
7, 8 years old now.
Right.
8, 9 years old. So, we said within the existing building, which is roughly 49,000 square feet. We said, okay, we're gonna renovate that as new. And what would that cost be on a square foot basis, again, without,
Mhm.
this is just broad square foot basis.
Do you want me to pass these down?
So,
Let me take, I can pull it up on there too.
so
I just.
what we're looking at is based on 49,000 square feet. We took out the 10,000 of the, permanent non-tenants. We're looking at a total cost of, 33,943 at 63.21%.
Hang on, do you want to wait? We'll get it pulled up.
Yeah.
That's what you talked about.
What? Well, not gonna ask you any questions yet. I'll let you do your thing.
Can you get in, Sam, or do you need Jay to do
It
something?
said someone just needs to let me in.
Oh, that's me, my bad.
But you could continue talking, Jim, while she
Oh, sure.
gets in.
So again, it's just broad square foot numbers we got from, our estimator. We're looking at a total of, like I said, 28,219,850 for hard construction costs, roughly 5 million for what we call soft costs. And again, this is all just broad based for a total of 33,299,423. At your reimbursement rate is 63.21%. The town share would be 12,258,57. And the state share would be 21,048,565. And again, as you see, it reflects the 20,000 square foot reduction of the permanent modules that were done about 8, 9. So that's pretty straightforward. There's really, we're not looking at a new option, anything like that at this point. There's gonna be very little site work involved. I mean, obviously, I think this will incorporate some new playgrounds. But the site work would be minimal because you really have very little here. So that's, again, very rough numbers of what we're looking at for the renovation for the project. Now, high school.
Oh, sorry, Jim, before we go, can just, for Broadbrook.
Yeah.
I know most of our conversation has been more about the fields and stuff, but one of the things we would like to do, I know we mentioned it prior, but just because it was a focus of this, it's maintaining our 3 areas of playground at Broadbrook. Having essentially like what we have now for playground.
I think that was in the spec, wasn't it? No?
Yeah, there's 2, I think there's 2 playgrounds in the ed spec, like, as of right now.
I don't know how, like you have swings and slides over here, and then you kind of have like or basically. No, you have the pre-K playground, that's separate. Then you have another like.
Blacktop in the middle.
Yeah, there's a blacktop and swings and slides. So there's 3 areas. They're all different, but like you have 2 playgrounds, but like one playground's kind of broken up into 2 spots.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, obviously we can get down to details.
Yeah.
What we have in there,
Okay,
but I don't think that's really.
anything significant.
Huge.
If you're not moving the exterior walls, it's not gonna be backflow consideration.
Right.
Okay, that's why I just wanted to check. Thank you.
So your square footage estimates suggest that it is almost $18 million cheaper to build new versus to
Around the
renovate.
middle high.
For the middle heights, yeah.
Okay.
With that said, that's right sizing the school.
Okay. And what happens if we don't right size it and don't get the weight?
If you, if you look,
Wait for special
we have that-
legislation, right?
So If you, so if you don't right size the building, then you get, your reimbursement rate gets reduced by a certain percentage. So like if you look at the renovate to new option, just as an example, so like your building size right now is, this is the existing high school size is 123, 244. So your reimbursement rate of 63.21% for a renovate to new project based on the space standards worksheet from the state would get reduced by 84.75%.
Well,
It's reduced by-
It's wording on that is a little bit, it's multiplied, there's a multiplier. So you multiply
Oh.
your reimbursement rate by 84.75%.
Oh, so,
Yeah.
so you would get 84% of the 60.
Yeah.
And what does that have to be? It's like
53.57. That's the 53% reimbursement rate there.
So why is the new construction at 53?
Because so the state has two reimbursement rates. They have one for renovate to new, which is 63.21%. And then one for new construction, which is 53.21%.
But I thought if our new was
It's below.
a cost savings
They've got. that's
over the.
what it is.
Yeah, that's the note at the bottom.
Look at the note.
Oh, I read too fast, sorry.
No problem.
Oh, we may be eligible.
Correct.
Yeah,
And just a clarifying question. So I know this is right sizing, correct? Like the 104,
Correct.
9.
Yeah.
Correct.
Now, let's say you built the school for 100 square feet. That additional, I'm just rounding numbers, 15,000 square feet, is it just that amount that
No.
gets the low rate or the whole project then gets? So
So they deem you pretty, they.
Yeah.
Get.
that was my understanding, but I just.
Yeah.
But if,
So it's not it's not a cost above, it's the whole project gets dinged by and for argument's sake, let's just say it was the 84 point, you get 84.75% of your reimbursement rate.
Yeah.
yeah. So Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't you say the new construction fits everything that we have currently?
That's no, I don't believe it does. There was some confusion last week with GWWO.
so,
Go ahead.
That's what they did say, though.
so what GWWO did is they looked at the ed spec, the way that it's currently written, the way that the current draft of the ed spec is written is you have 126,788 square feet, correct, right? What they said is they used the space standard number of roughly 104,000. And they said, okay, let's, look at what that would look like holistically to build a new high school, 104,000. That means that we have to go through the ed spec and look at reductions and size and size of spaces and quantity of spaces to fit within the 104,000. Is it possible that your ed spec could fit you can do your programming and stuff within the 104,000? Absolutely, but some cuts are gonna need to be made. And
Remember them talking about shared spaces in classrooms?
Teachers aren't gonna all have.
Yeah.
that's an option, yes, but that's something
So
that,
those are all options that could get us to
Correct.
having
yes.
So
all of our programs.
just so we've engaged Fran again to take a closer look, and that's why she sent you an email today, Patrick, about
Yeah, I got that.
understanding your scheduling, so that way she can take a look and make some recommendations. You either accept or reject the recommendations, but I think we need to take a look at the possibility of reducing the size. One of the things is that she didn't take into account is, you have a robust special ed program. Those children are getting counted twice. They're getting counted in special ed, but they're also getting counted in your general population. So that increases the number of classrooms. So that's one of the things that we're taking a look at as well. Because you have full-time, a lot of your students get full-time special ed. So that then will reduce the number of classrooms, general classrooms that you would need. That's one way, that's one way she's looking at it. The other one is she asked you about how you're gonna be doing your scheduling. Looking at the middle school, essentially, I'm not sure if you break it up in teams or not.
We do,
Okay, so you basically have one team per grade.
correct.
All right, so with that said, she understood it to be two teams per grade. So we think we might have some additional general classrooms in the middle school. So she's going
That
through
we
that.
need or that we do not need?
That you do not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Same thing with the high school. Now, the high school is going to be reduced again by your full-time special ed students. And that would reduce the number of classrooms needed. So we're taking another look at that. We'll make the recommendations, send them off to you. You do what you want with them, you know. They're just, you know, our recommendations to try to get the middle high school back down to or closer to your space standards.
Yeah, I'm all for any type of outside the box thinking. I do think the special ed conversation is oversimplifying those kids' programs. They do follow like an inclusive program, so even if they spent the majority, they do spend quite a bit of time like in the regular classroom too. The only exception is the transition program. I could see those students do not interact because they really are treated as a separate entity.
But
So,
you also have to look at, you know, if you're doing 7 periods,
Yep.
teachers teach 5 periods.
correct, yep,
So you have 2 periods of a
Yeah.
classroom unused.
so that might
And what
create
we
some.
would do is look at that as well. And looking at fully utilizing classrooms, which would reduce the amount of classrooms that you need and thereby reduce the size of the school. We just did, actually, we just went through this with Norwich. They were a little skeptical as well, and then they ended up talking to Groton, who has a 5-year-old middle school, and they got confirmation from Groton, yeah, this is how they did it, this is how it works. And we were able to save it on their end. They were only about 7,000 square feet over, and we were able to save that 7,000 square feet. Obviously, you have a very, like I said, a very robust special ed program. I'm not sure if we're going to get down to the 104, but I think we might be able to get much closer.
And that tracks with a conversation I had with Representative Foster about special legislation. And I had her talk to her leadership about, you know, getting the 20,000 square foot number, and she said, you gotta come closer to that was what her comments were. She
Closer
can get
to
it,
what number?
104.
Yeah.
So, I mean, wherever we can trim that's one of the 3 things. I asked her for 3 things. I asked her for the special legislation around the space waiver, and then she told me 20,000 is not lying. And she actually ran it up her leadership poll. That wasn't just her reaction. I asked her about the reimbursement rate because right now the math is scary. We cannot do both of these projects as currently budgeted with the reimbursement rate that we are. So taking an 80 or a 16% reduction on the reimbursement rate kills the whole thing.
Yeah.
She said that the reimbursement rate and getting that up to a number where the math would work is very possible. Specifically the legislation around the special ed and early childhood space. She said that it's got somewhere between a 75 and a 90% chance of passing on its own, regardless of anything carved out for us. So she didn't have any concerns about that. And the last thing that I asked her for is the time extension. Because the June 30 date is like on top of us. And her comment to that was that is something that she could help with, but not until, and this is homework for Patrick and me, not until DAS tells us no first. So we need to approach them, ask them for additional time. They need to tell us no, and then she can get the legislature to step in.
Honestly, they don't tell us anything. In my experience, sometimes you don't always get a response.
Then we use political channels. If they're not being responsive.
What we can do
What is
is, we can, if you don't mind, maybe we can make the request on your behalf, copy you, Patrick, as they're gonna want to hear from you and you, Jason, send it to Ella and let them respond, and then now we have our answer. See, what I would be very surprised if they gave us an extension.
Oh, that's fine. We just need a.
DAS, that's what I'm saying, yeah, because they typically are not, especially with what went on in the past, they typically don't go out on a limb anymore, you know,
Yeah.
so. I get that.
For good reason.
Okay.
So the contact you gave me was Amanda Belagamo. Is that who you deal with?
No, we typically deal with Ellison.
I don't know her.
And she's the new head of OGA. So they broke up Office of School Construction Grants, so OSCGR, into 3 different categories. They have OGA, which is the grants, which is like Michelle, Ella, and, you know, the money people. Then they have the reviewers, Bob Selner, Kermit, and
Barbara, Andrea.
and Andrea. So they just review the technical documents, and then they have audit, which comes in years after and does their audit. Yeah. Okay, so we'll craft an email, either, you know, Patrick, you can send it out or whatever. I would definitely, you know, copy Jason, and if you like, copy us on it.
Yep.
And send it to Ella, and most likely she's gonna get back. She gets back to you pretty quickly. And I say quickly, it could be, you know, if it's more than a week, that's kind of late. You know, we can ask her again, hey, you know, have you taken a look at this? And, you know, we'll have her answer hopefully. So,
No, I appreciate that.
but in the meantime, just so everybody is aware, and I think you mentioned it, GWW is in the process of having their professional cost estimator estimate Broadbrook,
Well, both.
both Broadbrook as well as the middle high school, based on what now, are they doing it based on the 104?
So the middle high school, they're doing both a renovate to new and a new construction option. Yeah, because we have to look at both. So they are estimating both currently.
Just for, sorry, for clarification on square footage, I know it's still a lot, but it's closer to like 15,000 after the last adjustments we made, correct?
What do you mean?
Like I had that
Rather than
homework to
20.
do, and then,
Yeah, they're based on the reductions that you made, it didn't make a huge dent in the square footage. So there still is stuff that needs to be reduced. I didn't incorporate that into the space matrix yet because we've had so many iterations of the space matrix that I just don't.
yeah, but just
Until we-
confirm that hasn't taken place.
That hasn't taken
And
place.
again, I know it's still a lot.
Yes.
I believe it's
Take a look,
15,000.
I'm hoping on Friday she has some recommendations that we can hear Patrick take a look at, and, you know, be comfortable with that. And if you have more, you know, yeah, I can reduce this, I can reduce that, that would be fantastic. So at least we can get somewhere closer, which obviously would reduce the cost, minimize your penalty, if not any penalty at all, depending on what we get for special, if we get special legislation. I think this, like Jason said, you gotta show an effort to get it reduced and get it closer, because I agree, the 20,000 square foot, I don't remember asking for a 20,000 square foot. You know,
What's the most? we
forgiveness. I'm not, you know, I want to say maybe in the 10,000 square foot area. You know, but that was on a magnet school, and they don't do anything for magnet schools, and you gotta be on that square foot area.
And again, I know 15,000 is still a lot, but every bit counts. So but I do believe like from the last, I think we're closer to 15
And you may be right, Patrick.
from our last one.
Yeah. So we'll have Fran take a look at that, but also again, like, she's looking at how you schedule. And seeing if we have some efficiencies there.
What about also having like a few smaller classrooms? I think it was said for like AP classes or ones which we do have a lot of, where we
Some
don't
of the
need.
changes.
Oh,
that
okay.
I suspect, yeah.
Find
So
some
that was some
there.
of the homework.
Yeah.
Can I ask Jason?
Whoops.
The special legislation has to do with the square footage, or it has to do with the timing? Because you talked about the timing. Well,
Two different things.
both.
Yeah.
But we would go for special legislation individually for each one.
Yeah, well, it might be in the same bill, but it's two different
Yeah.
asks. Like probably in two different sections of both the omnibus, could be the implementer, could be in.
And where would we be? How do we get to when we would be comfortable extending it to? Because you took what I was gonna do under miscellaneous, which is, if y'all remember the analogy I said about we're on a train and we're speeding in the track and we don't know where it's headed. I feel more urgently about that now as we get closer to June. So if we get that, if we ask for that special legislation, what would we, it would be the Board of Ed that would be asking for it, or it would be,
That is probably sufficient.
That was my
but a
understanding.
decision would be made by who as far as doing that? I mean,
Are you
I
saying-
can give you an example. So
Like the
So for, we're in the process of working on, Sherman School in Sherman, Connecticut. They had special legislation where they were held a referendum. I want to say it was on October 5th, and their special legislation said they could submit a grant application on October 1st. So you could submit a grant application before you have a referendum, as long as you have a referendum scheduled.
You have to have the referendum date identified in your grant application, or at least tell them in the special legislation, we're gonna have a referendum on such and such date. I would recommend it, and the state usually, I've seen this on a number of different, so Sherman was one example, there was another example, I think there was a project. They usually use October 1st, because they-
Central Middle School, what date? They had, they had special ledge for grant applications too for Central Middle School in Greenwich.
That one, no, that was, we submitted in November, but then got special legislation to
Go.
accept.
Oh, okay, sorry, never mind.
Right. So, yeah, that was a little bit different, but usually the cutoff is October 1st. And the reason that they want to do October 1st is because they have to review the grant application. And again, like Samantha said, you don't need to have your referendum before that. You can have it after October 1st, and you can't have it past election day. And you have to get the results in by the week after election day. I can't remember, it fluctuates obviously with election day, but and the reason for that is DAS or GA has to get the priority list compiled and presented to the legislation by December 15th, or presented to the governor by December 15th every year. They can't miss that date. So that's why they usually don't go beyond October 1st for an extension. But that also gives you the opportunity to either have a referendum prior or after.
so because we need to keep track of the time, that's why I brought it up here, because if it's something that Board of Ed needs to have a say in, and I think it's appropriate that they would have a say, that we need to kind of know that now,
Well,
as we get closer to June, you know?
I would think, they're two different asks, so they can be made at two different times. I am
Oh, okay.
reasonably certain we need the extension. So with that being said, I think that we ought to approach our legislative partners like
With the
now,
extension now.
so that they have time to get things worked through their process, which is time closed. And then on the space waiver piece, we take that when we get there, but we're not there yet.
I would like to try to get that as soon as possible, just so that way kind of wrap everything up.
Which part?
The space waiver, at least understand what we're looking for. I would say within the next weeks, Patrick, if we can work on that, you know, like I said, I'm hoping to get you something with our recommendations on Friday. And then take a look and see what you can do with that. And in terms of special legislation and the language, we have options, you know.
Yeah, we have examples that we could use.
Examples of
Yeah.
different legislative requests, and they're all worded a little bit differently. It might be like for the extension, we either have an extension or extension and back on. What you want is an extension and back on the list, meaning when we submit on October 1st, it's for the 2025 priority list. So we have some examples that we've taken out of prior legislation
Mhm.
and just,
That is-
took out the name of the district and the project number. So
So
we
Jim,
can give you that.
I don't want to cut you off too much,
Yep.
but we do have only a very few minutes. So Jason and Patrick, you would work on that and work with Jim on
Yeah,
that, so.
my understanding is Jim will give us the language.
Yeah.
We'll send it, include everyone.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm
On-
confused. On which
On
part?
the time,
Time extension, we need to reach out. They're gonna connect us with OGA
DAS, so
and
we
they're
have
gonna
to do that.
either
first.
tell us yes or no, so we can.
so the square footage extent, legislation is the one that you're talking about having examples
Well, we have that and we have the
for the
time
time.
extension. So,
Okay.
yeah, and we also don't do something. I thought we had 3.
Yeah, we have a few that we can pull from.
So Heather had a,
I just have a quick question. In the guesstimate that you gave us, does that include demo? If that includes any kind of demo or the estimate?
That's a good question. High school.
Okay.
I want to say it does.
Okay.
I sure hope it does. I don't know where near. About that. Yeah, I think it does because I had the estimator that's working on it now.
Okay,
When I talked to him a few weeks back, I tell him it's a new and, give me a price for a new and demo.
okay, and Fran had a question.
I do. I think we've gone off track to the original conversation, and I don't know that we came up with anything to give to the architects regarding the ed specs that we needed for outside shape, because I also had a question regarding the middle school, because currently the middle school has a small swing set or an area for the kids in middle school, 5th and 6th graders, maybe to go outside. And I don't see anything like that at the high school. We didn't talk about that either. So, I get them outside.
Yeah.
And, so like,
I think with an awareness of that, I think that was mentioned the last time as well.
I don't believe that it was.
The
For 5th
swing-
grade?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not a playground,
Not a playground, just,
but we did talk about well, like I said, after the meeting last week, I did ask the architects to see if they could slide the building over and create a multi-purpose field outside the middle school wing.
this is for the younger, the fifth graders.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm not,
But considering today's conversation, and I mean, is it possible, I would like for them to consider moving the school around so that our multi-purpose field is not near, there's a building separating or if it's possible to separate the 5th graders or the middle school from the high school inside and physically outside so that at least line of sight.
well, yeah, they would be, and you gotta remember, I don't think high school has.
As playtime.
They don't have any playtime,
But they do afterwards, so we're talking about the
Exactly.
field.
but that's why I was thinking the multi-use field for the middle school would be outside the middle school wing. And then the rest of the fields for the high school are obviously in the back. I mean, I'm not sure if that's gonna be enough separation. I don't know.
But you
What?
can
I mean,
have that in consideration.
logically, that kind of makes, when we were looking at it, talking about it after the meeting.
I think your consideration of the multi-use field is, I'm thinking about several things. I'm thinking about during the day, 5th grade currently gets a chance to go outside.
Okay,
I'm also thinking about in the afternoon, when the 5th grade goes out to, say, work on their multi-use field, they're practicing, the high school's already out practicing on, let's just say the soccer fall season. The high school's out on the
In the
their
back.
soccer field there in the back, and the multi-use field is right here.
Yeah.
And they're right next to each other.
So as of right now, on the right side of the high school, there's like a soccer field kind of set up a soccer field, I think, for the girls to practice at some point.
So if they
So looking at something like that, right?
Yeah, so if
Having
they
it
just-
to the side.
toy with moving the school to the left from its current location instead of north, move it south. So maybe you have the building between the multi-use
then you
field.
have the 5th graders on the high school wing,
They're on the high school side.
right, or on the high school side. I mean, I guess we
Try to
could switch.
Because we've got to,
I understand, but I just needed to bring it up because that to my, as I remember, that was the purpose of this meeting, was to talk about these
Yeah.
things.
I mean, we could take a look at switching,
It is.
So
But
you have to put them outside.
you do, but I mean, I don't know how, I mean, we have a swing set. I don't know. I know Tim was on, looks like he got off.
Oh,
The principal of the middle school. but,
middle school playground is,
It's,
Nothing.
yeah, I wouldn't call it a playground. They have a swing set.
Yeah.
I don't know how much it actually is used. I will say, like, I don't know what level of investment like we should be considering when we're talking about 20 minutes a day. Like they're getting outside, they're playing, they're running around, they're doing those things. But when you're thinking of like the investment, you know, I guess I would defer to like more so the parents, and I guess like the school staff as far as.
Well, me personally, I'm just looking for a spot for them
So-
to be outside.
So we never even got to
Well,
community
having space is different than.
community engagement.
No, 'cause-
So we didn't get to community engagement even, and that would be part of that.
Yeah.
That would be discussed there. So, we have no time left. We're gonna have to make a motion to adjourn.
On the question, Adrian.
Second.
All those in favor?
every 2 weeks.
Bye.
All right.
Aye.